we can pretend that there's rules to war, but quite often, if you follow the rules, you might be the only side following the rules.
What's the most efficient path to victory against this particular opponent?
He's dropping off for the choke here. We could see the finish. It's looking tight. Tight at Alpra.
Hey guys, welcome to the Everyday Jiu Jitsu podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kwan. The Everyday Jiu Jitsu podcast is everything you need to know about Jiu Jitsu. And today we are going to talk about how you can win a fight. By the way, if you hear this noise, that's me spraying my cats who relentlessly try and jump onto my desk and disrupt the show. And mercilessly, I spray them with the dreaded spray bottle. Guys, we're going to talk about how you can win a fight. We're going to discuss situations that involve military warfare situations, jiu-jitsu, of course, and even street fight situations. Of course, I'm not in the military, and I haven't had that many street fights, but nonetheless, I do believe that there are parallels between these different forms of combat, which we will discuss throughout the show. Before I get started, please like, share, subscribe to the show, leave a review if you can, leave comments where you can. It really helps me make the show visible, and it really helps the algorithm. Also, if you want to support the show, please check out the links in the show notes. You can find all of my offerings there. And thank you for joining me. Okay, so how to win a fight. First, let's just discuss preparation. Guys, you may never get into a fight in your life, and that's fine. But by now, we should be doing some form of preparation, whether it's, at least at the very least, staying in shape, staying active. This is pretty essential for life and good health. But come on, if you're not training jiu-jitsu right now, what are you doing? Everyone's getting into jiu-jitsu. Everyone realizes how effective it is. I think it's incredibly important to do some form of martial arts training. But of course, I would say a low amount of the population actually does engage in martial arts training. That being said, if you are a police officer, for example, and your job is going to require you to get into physical altercations with people, I think it's crazy that some people wouldn't do a little bit of grappling and be law enforcement. It's really, really important that we are doing some form of martial arts training, in my opinion, just as a life skill, just kind of like you would learn how to swim. But that's, again, I'm very biased. But if your job requires you to deal with people hand-to-hand situations, I think it's very important that grappling becomes, at least that you become competent in grappling. You don't have to become an expert, but to be able to understand how to use your body to control someone else is very, very valuable. So just for life, I would say it's super important to have some kind of training, or I think everyone should need to know how to fight in some way, shape, or form. I think that it would be great if public schools really offered martial arts or had an emphasis on martial arts. Of course, this could have other benefits. People could learn things like respect and, the importance of not starting a fight with someone. I believe, and this is also a philosophy of Jigoro Kano, the inventor of judo. He said, judo is not just for fighting. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing here. It's not just for fighting, but it's to improve overall society, one person at a time, right? One person studies judo. Not only do they become good at defending themselves, but also they become a better person, and the qualities and the discipline and the struggle that is felt through the training of judo now trickles down through society, and society just improves as a whole. And I fully believe this. It's one of the reasons why I do what I do. And I think everyone should have some kind of martial arts training. Obviously, I'm biased towards grappling. So if you have that background, you're always going to be more prepared for a physical situation. Okay. And the next thing would be stress inoculation training. So you'll always be able to identify somebody in a fight who's never fought before, or who's never trained before. They get exhausted quickly. They're way too tense. They're way out of position. Quite often, a trademark of somebody who's not trained is they'll be incredibly off balanced as they try to go through their attacks. I'm starting to study kickboxing, and one of the main things about kickboxing is when you're getting started is don't get off balanced. It's really easy to off balance yourself when you're throwing strikes and kicks and things like this. And so most of what I do when I'm sparring and training is just trying to remain in balance and trying to stay in a good stance, trying to not get incredibly stressed out or exhausted by the end of the round. And this is very, very valuable in all forms of fighting. You can always tell when someone isn't trained. They don't have the ability to make decisions under stress. And this is another situation where martial arts training can trickle into other aspects of life. I remember when I did PANS for the first time as a purple belt. After that, I was, it was such a stressful situation on such a big stage, even though no one really gave a fuck about how I did, let's be honest. But to me, it was a big deal. Life becomes a lot easier when you do martial arts, when you compete, when you go into a gym and you grapple people every day. Life seems to just get easier, and the decisions that you make in stressful situations. I was a chef at the time. It's a stressful job. There's a lot of stress in that profession. It just everything became easier, I noticed. Okay. And there's an old wrestling quote, after you wrestle, everything becomes easier. And this is just the truth, right? When you put yourself through things like that, you can make these decisions under stress. Generally, your life, things that were once stressful, dealing with a boss, dealing with a spouse or somebody you don't like, those things tend to get a lot easier, and you can make stressful decisions with a lot more of a clear head. Training while fatigued. When you're training, obviously, you can manage your training. Sometimes you're going to want to train with a low heart rate, go through training and just play more of a technical practice where you're trying to execute your moves and reach certain objectives without raising your heart rate. Then there's other times where perhaps you are preparing for a competition, and it makes sense to get your heart rate up. So I think it's important to obviously go into training with particular objectives, things you want to work on. But one of those things could be, okay, I want to see how good my technique is when I'm exhausted, when I'm fatigued. And so this is a very important part of any competitive grappler's preparation, right? It's a good thing to go in fatigued. Maybe you're not sitting out rounds. You are not even resting in between rounds, or you're doing exercise in between rounds. You are doing many rounds back to back. Shark Tank. There's so many different ways we do this. Strength and conditioning training. One of my favorite and least favorite things in the world is riding the fan bike. I think for competition, it's one of the most important pieces of equipment that any professional athlete can have. And getting used to the idea of being fatigued so that the competition potentially could become easier, or that that you can take yourself to a particular point before you break, finding that point and then kind of playing on that line and then trying to train when you're on that line. Obviously, it's uncomfortable, but a lot of things about martial arts and competition are uncomfortable. Managing energy and regulating tension. So again, I just discussed in kickboxing, keeping a good stance and kind of like not being so tense in your body. Guys, when you're really, really tense, you become predictable. You become easier to move. You become more off balanced because you're committing your weight more to a particular direction of attack instead of just staying centered and in a good stance. And if your muscles are always tense, like I said, you're easier to move, but you're also going to fatigue a lot quicker. And so a lot of fighting, grappling, any sport really has to do with regulating the amount of tension in your body so that you can go and play the long game and play a sport for, minutes or even hours at a time. Or if you're in a 10-minute match, you can manage your energy throughout the course of that 10-minute match. If you're in a fight situation, you don't know how long that fight's going to be. You don't know how long, maybe potentially you fight for a little bit and then you got to run and get the fuck out of there. So if that happens, are you going to have gas in the tank to do that after you got into a fight? Super important that we get used to the idea of managing the tension within our body and just sort of like regulating that tension and managing our energy expenditure, because again, in a fight situation, we never know, how much energy we're going to need. So we just need to make sure that we're as efficient as possible. And really that's what jiu-jitsu is, technique and efficiency under stress. Recovery, it kind of goes hand in hand with this. So again, how fast can you recover? Are you able to recover while you're fighting, right? Can you find sort of these pit stop positions or positions where you can, we talked about camping recently and just finding these spots where you can kind of recover while your partner works hard, usually getting to a dominant position. This is incredibly valuable if you're in a fight, that you can, even if you're in the middle of a situation, an altercation where you're defending yourself and you're trying to fight someone, you have to be able to recover as well. And ideally, you're recovering while you're making them work. This would be the perfect situation. Lastly, I'll say with preparation, as far as, competition is concerned, or even self-defense situations, there's numerous videos of altercations and fights on the internet. The idea of watching footage, watching people fight, watching what they do in an actual fight. This is why MMA really pulled the wool over not the wool over our eyes, but it really exposed what we knew that fighting was. And a lot of the people that were, martial artists were primarily strikers before the UFC. Grappling wasn't as much it wasn't considered a dominant martial art in a real fight situation. And then we watch the UFC and we realize, man, like if you know Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and the other person doesn't, like there's a high chance that you're going to be able to take the fight to the floor and finish the fight. You can take a high level striker to the floor and strangle them. And so everybody needed to evolve and learn Jiu Jitsu. And so if you watch footage of what an actual fight looks like, you realize it looks nothing like the fights in Hollywood movies. Whereas previously, a lot of people were under this, misconception that a fight looked like kung fu movies or it looked like a choreographed fight in a Hollywood movie, and it just isn't. And for me, doing jiu-jitsu as long as I can and watching MMA as long as I have, or doing jiu-jitsu as long as I have, watching MMA as long as I have, I now look at Hollywood movie fight scenes and it's hard to not see how fake it looks. It's hard to not see how flashy it looks. And this is why we even see Hollywood fight movies and the choreographed fighting scenes take on more of an MMA or jiu-jitsu style approach now. We're seeing submissions, we're seeing different jiu-jitsu positions and things like this worked into the choreographed fights. And so my point is watching actual fighting, where MMA is the perfect example of this. Watching actual fighting, you can sort of learn from watching. Okay, this is a common thing that's happening. When someone gets taken down, if they don't know how to wrestle, if they can't get back up, if they don't know how to defend certain positions, they're fucked. It's over, right? Where are these best positions we can get to tilt the fight in our favor? Or if you're a jiu-jitsu competitor, let's say, watching competition footage to see what the most common reactions are, to see what the highest level athletes are doing, it's incredibly valuable to watch this stuff. And so this is sort of all part of your preparation, whether you are a competitor, whether you are just somebody who wants to be able to defend themselves, or whether you're a police officer who knows that they're going to eventually, it's inevitable that you're going to get into a hand-to-hand situation and you don't want to use lethal force. You just want to be able to control someone. Studying the anatomy of an actual fight, an actual altercation, is very, very important, because you can learn just from watching things. Now we're going to shift our focus to the idea of asymmetrical warfare. So what is this concept? This is the idea of making it an unfair fight. This goes through all aspects of combat, military combat throughout history. Any physical fight, or in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, we always want to make the fight an unfair fight for our opponent. This is one of the key concepts. It's a principle in combat to the human experience, is always just make the fight your fight and take your opponent out of their favorite position. So you're going to be playing to your strengths. What are you good at? I remember in my area here in Vancouver, I think it was around 2018 when I really started learning leg locks. I was training with Rob Bernacki, who really in this area and globally, it was a real pioneer for the study of leg locks, leg attacks. And we really shifted our focus in jiu-jitsu to leg attacks because it was a very untapped market. Of course, there were people using leg locks. They've been using them forever. There's legends in the sport who are using leg locks, like Rusamar Palhar is using leg locks in MMA. The Danaher Death Squad, which is what our system was basically, we were trying to emulate. Other than that, the people locally here, no one was using leg locks. Maybe a handful of people started using leg locks, and it was very primitive to say the least. And so we saw an opportunity. Hey, there's a novelty here with this system. So if we get good at leg locks, we can go in and destroy the competition without doing like traditional style jiu-jitsu, much like what a lot of these Danaher guys were doing. They were just entering the legs and finishing their opponents because there was such a lack of knowledge at the time. And this is the idea of, it's kind of like where jiu-jitsu is an arms race, right? We can play to our strengths and make this an unfair fight if we can expose our partner's weakness with their lack of knowledge in leg locks. And we have that knowledge and we can use it. It would be no different from another country developing a type of weapon, like a nuclear weapon, and then being able to unleash it onto another country to gain control or to win a war or whatever, which happened. And when you have that ace in the hole, when you have that technological advancement over that foe, it's very difficult for them to answer back, right? We've seen this throughout history multiple times throughout, the Maxim gun. I don't even know when that was invented, probably the 1800s, to the tanks that came around in World War I, which totally changed the battle in the trenches, where there was really no answer from the Germans. They're all of a sudden, these giant metal machines are rolling through no man's land, and there was no way to really stop them at the time. And then, of course, I just mentioned nukes, which ended World War II. As history has told us. So having those advantages and finding those advantages is just a natural part of fighting. It's a natural part of combat, and we're constantly looking for that. So again, if let's say I know that I'm going against somebody who has no idea what a berimbolo is, right? And this is something that happened too in jiu-jitsu about 15 years ago. So, somebody doesn't have any idea what a berimbolo is. If you use a berimbolo on that person, they're probably getting their back taken, right? If you know that there's a big hole in your opponent's game, you want to exploit that, right? Maybe you're going against somebody on the street who wants to start throwing hands at you, and they look big and strong and they have a good stance. You can assume, okay, maybe this person could be dangerous. What if they catch me or whatever? Pretty smart idea to take the fight to the ground. But again, I'm biased towards grappling as a means of ending a conflict or ending an altercation. So long story short, play to your strengths and try to expose the weaknesses in your opponent's game. Another thing we could do to make the fight an unfair fight, I just spent a couple of episodes on Kazushi and weight distribution, is the idea of using fatigue as a weapon. You're going to hear me just constantly talk about this. In the previous episodes, I talked about camping, backtracking, how we can make our partner carry our weight over long periods of time. A great post that I saw John Danaher talk about the other day was, he said, if you're putting your weight onto your partner, onto frames that are well composed, they're going to be able to hold you there for long periods of time. But if you just misalign their frames ever so slightly to the point where they cannot manage weight efficiently, now you can really fatigue them by putting weight on them. This would be the proper time to really, drop weight on your partner, is when their frames are inefficient. And so doing this, we can use fatigue as a weapon. In a situation like, a street fight situation, we see jiu-jitsu people do this. Take the fight to the ground, mount the person and hold them while the other person's freaking out. They're just exerting all their energy, usually a complete lack of regulated tension, because quite often they're untrained. They have no idea what to do. And then their body just starts to shut down, and they start to accept that, okay, now I have to give up. I've lost this fight, and they're just mounted, or someone's behind them and they're just holding them in a strangle. We've seen this on the internet so many times. This is a tactic as old as humanity when it comes to military combat. We see armies use certain tactics to fatigue and demoralize another army before they launch an initiative. So let's say they're starving that army by cutting off supply lines. They're attacking in the middle of the night. Maybe they have night vision. The other army doesn't have night vision. And so the army with night vision attacks in the middle of the night. And, these different tactics to make the fight an unfair fight, or to make it a war of attrition where it's a long drawn out battle. Again, ideally attacking the supply lines of said opponent. Now you can go in, and those people are hungry, they're tired, they're scared, they have no idea where the attacks are coming from. These are all very, very good ways to make it an unfair fight. Going along with that, dominating the offensive cycle. So again, this concept that I've talked about in the episode a lot. If you can identify the offensive cycle from all positions in jiu-jitsu, you're going to be able to better know where you are in the fight. It's important to know when you're on the defensive end of things, when you're in a neutral zone where both athlete could potentially take control, and when you're in the offensive zone. So obviously, you want to be able to maximize the amount of time that you're in the offensive cycle and minimize the amount of time you're put into a defensive cycle. And I would say that most of the time, 80%, 70% of a match is spent in the neutral cycle, where, just imagine someone in jiu-jitsu standing over another person in their guard, and the person on the bottom's gripping and trying to off balance, and the person on top is trying to disconnect the frames and trying to just stay on top and balance out. This is very neutral. No one's really taking initiative. But in a second, top person gets off balanced and boom, trap triangle is shot up. Now the bottom person has clearly taken the offensive cycle. Or maybe the bottom person gets on top and they get chest to chest, and now they're just camping in the half guard, crushing the person chest to chest. So we really want to dominate that offensive cycle. And before we can do that, we really need to, like I said, identify where we are, identify the offensive cycle, and realize that it's not just, I'm going to attack you as hard as you can. My attack failed. Now I'm falling back into the defense. You're attacking me. And now that attack failed. Now I'm attacking, and we're just constantly, it's so back and forth. You see this a lot in white belt, blue belt matches where there's no real control. It's just like 100% offense. Now we're on the defense. Now 100% offense. Now we're on the defense. I think true mastery comes from people who can launch attacks, and when the attacks fail, they just backtrack into a situation where they're still somewhat in the offense, right? And the control is so good that it's not all or nothing. They're backtracking and still remaining somewhat into the offensive cycle. We have to be able to seek dominant positions and create angles. So in Jiu Jitsu, the point scoring structure was designed to reward dominant positions and dominant actions like passing the guard, going to mount, back. I don't have to tell you guys this, how the sport works. But getting to those dominant positions really will dictate who wins the fight. And, again, this was evident in the early days of Vale Tudo MMA, where the grappler would just take a complete dominant position and the person on the bottom had no idea what they're doing, right? And now the grappler can just land strikes and submissions from these dominant positions. Creating angles of attack, again, is something that is throughout all forms of combat, whether it's in the in military warfare, where armies, they're fighting around in over maybe what you call no man's land on the front line, and then if an army can go around and encircle the other army and flank them, and now they're in like what's known as like a pincer movement, or they're now encircled in a pocket where they cannot escape. This is a tactic that armies have been using forever and still used to this day, surrounding your opponent and coming from the sides so that there's no escape. This is some of the biggest battles in military history have been done this way. In striking, it could be so much as creating an angle so that you step off to the side, and now you have an option to attack your opponent, and they are now basically in full defensive mode. They're trying to face you square on so that they can recover the offensive cycle. And this is what my striking coach calls freezing. When you move to the side and now your opponent is frozen, they can't easily strike you because you've created an angle. You can strike them, they can't strike you. Dominant angles, we do this in wrestling, we do this in judo. I look at taking the back in jiu-jitsu as the idea of getting a dominant angle, right? If you can get behind someone, it's very hard for them to attack you, and you can attack them. So we're always seeking these dominant angles. If I'm in a street fight, one of the best things I can do is try and get behind someone. That's where a lot of your submissions are. That's where you'll be safest. That's where a lot of the easiest takedowns are. Some of the best controls are there. Okay, the last thing I'm going to say in making the fight an unfair fight, guys, I realize I don't want to sound like a thug, and I don't want to encourage people to do anything illegal, but personally for me, I think it's intelligent to have something on you that could potentially make a fight an unfair fight if somebody tried to attack you. I know a lot of places in the States have open carry. I wish we had that in Canada. If you listen to the show, you probably know by now, like, I'm a fan of firearms. I believe in defending yourself. I believe that relying on the police, people who have firearms, to come and defend me if somebody is attacking me and my family, most of the time, they're not going to be coming in and stopping the altercation. Most of the time, they're going to be coming in and looking at the aftermath of the altercation, because the fact is if somebody's attacking you in the moment, you and your family, basically it's up to you. Okay. And you can't just call 911 and boom, cops are there. The guys with the guns now, the people that you trust with guns, but for some reason we don't trust ourselves walking around with guns. Now we're expecting those people to come save us. In reality, it's your life on the line. It's your kids and your life on the line, and you have to defend yourself. So for me, I wish we had open carry in Canada. But of course, we're very left leaning up here. In fact, we're trying, apparently politically, we're trying to go the other direction and try and take away people's guns when I think guns are great. And I would actually, this is just my personal opinion. I don't care if you disagree with it or not. Again, start a comment in the comment section. Let's have a discussion about it. But I think that the world would, or at least our society here in the West, would be safer if everyone was armed, because everyone would be afraid to shoot each other. Everyone would be afraid to attack each other. And statistically, if you look at places that have open carry, this does echo this theory. Generally, the places that have open carry are statistically safer than places where firearms are more limited, because guess what? Bad guys still get firearms on the black market, and it actually allows them to do their job easier when you can't defend yourself. Maybe you're thinking, Matt, you're a crazy bastard. Firearms are not good. I don't want to carry a firearm on me. That's fine. It's totally understandable. But, you know, carry something on you. Like, again, I know it's illegal to have pepper spray on you, but hey, you know what? If my loved ones are going out and they're going to be walking in the city in the night, I don't care about what's illegal or not. I care about my family being able to defend themselves if I'm not around. And if you get approached by two guys, you're outnumbered, and they have bad intentions. I mean, you got to be able to tip the scales in your favor in that situation, or have even a knife. Like, I carry a pocket knife with me for utility reasons. My dad's always carried a knife. I'm not planning on stabbing someone. In fact, I couldn't imagine a more terrifying thing than having to stab somebody. But it's one of those things where I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it, right? It's just I think, important if you get into these situations to always be prepared, to always have kind of a backup plan. And sometimes, I hate to say it, especially with the way society is nowadays, like, it's almost a good thing to prepare for the worst, right? And I'm not going to say expect the worst, but just be prepared for the absolute worst thing to happen. And then when you're in that situation, you'll be a lot more glad that you thought ahead and sort of, you know, have that ace in the hole. Anyways, that's just how I look at it. Again, guys, start a discussion in the chat. I think that it's a really interesting discussion, especially when we start talking about, like, open carry. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? For me, I wish I could walk around with a gun. I think it'd be so fucking cool. But again, I'm a responsible gun owner. I train with firearms. I'm very, I think that learning how they work and the safety behind them is so important. I'm not one of these guys who's going to pull a gun on somebody just because I don't like what they said to me. I think that that's absolutely crazy. I also think that people would, this is just a theory, I think people would be more respectful and less inclined to start conflict if they knew that there's a potential that this person could be carrying a firearm, right? Okay, let's talk about reading your opponent. So we're not going to spend too much time talking about this, but it's the idea of kind of assessing the situation. Okay, somebody's picking a fight with me. I gotta make a quick assessment on their body type, their how aggressive they are. What kind of stance are they using? What kind of tactics are they using? These are all things that is so important. Like, if I'm at the bar and there's a guy who's absolutely obliterated, he's so drunk, like, his ability to control his impulses is probably lower than, you know, somebody who's sober, because as we know, alcohol is a horrible thing, and it can make you do absolutely horrible things. And, you know, we've all been victims of this in some way, I would say, especially if you're like a young man who likes to go drinking. Like, you get a couple of shots of tequila or whiskey in you, and, like, man, there's a reason why they say that shit makes you want to fight, is because it does. And it makes you not care about things. It makes you not think about things, you know, down the line. And you could be making a mistake because you're drunk, you know, having fun at a bar, and make a mistake that changes your life, changes somebody else's life. I've spoken about this before on the podcast. So again, you got to assess, like, okay, is the person I'm fighting, like, really drunk? Do they appear to be on, like, meth? Okay. If you're fighting someone on meth, and they're completely in another world, they're probably going to have a high pain tolerance, and you're probably going to have to, like, convincingly put that person away. Like, somebody who's really, really high and they seem dangerous, if you go and armbar that person, they're probably not going to stop them from continuing their attack. But if you strangle them unconscious, or you somehow you can induce, take away their ability to be cognizant and they're asleep, that's probably a pretty good strategy, assuming I'm not saying you should kill this person, but choke them out. That would be an effective way to neutralize the situation. If I look at someone, I'm like, man, this guy's like way bigger than me. He's a big dude and he's like coming at me, and I have to assess that. I have to think, okay, like which one of my techniques would work best? What style of fighting would be best? Should I strike with this person? What if this person comes up and his hands are right up and he's like, he's got a good stance. And I look at that, I'm like, man, this guy probably knows some shit. I should probably do what I know, try and take the fight to the ground where I can make this a fair fight or even an unfair fight in my favor. So looking at their stance and their body type, certain techniques will work against bigger people more than others, right? When I do jiu-jitsu, if I'm rolling with someone who's much bigger than me, and a lot of the time I'm not going to go for takedowns on this person because, hey, if they're good at takedowns, and a lot of the time their stance will indicate this. If I start standing with this person, I can end up on the floor in a bad position. If I pull guard, at least I got to the ground on my terms. And now, okay, let's imagine I'm fighting this giant guy from my guard. Do you think I'm going to be shooting up triangles and arm bars from the open guard? Probably not, because it's a lot easier for a big guy to posture up and pass the guard and crush the triangle. And guess what? Now you've just lost your guard because you went for a submission that really wasn't there. So these things all have to go into, your how you factor how you're going to deal with an altercation. And also, guys, we should just be looking to diffuse altercations, whether it means, using our words, which is ideally what the first thing we're going to do in an altercation. So when we're out and about, someone trying to fight us, we're like, hey man, like, let's just chill, right? Have your hands up, showing them your hands, giving them this body language as if like, hey, I come in peace. I don't want to fight. But really, your hands are also there to protect you in case something should happen. This is, tactically diffusing a situation. Always using your words is smart. You should always try and diffuse. Fighting should be a last resort. We shouldn't be going out looking for fights, although I know a lot of people do. I think that that's very foolish. And again, you can change your life. You can change the person's life very, very easily. And tactically speeding, like, we really want to be able to read the environment when we're going around. Like, anywhere I go, I'm reading the environment. I'm thinking about, like, where are the exits? Okay. If there is an altercation, I always got to do a quick glance through my peripheral and see, is this person, do they have friends that are also going to want to fight? If they do, I mean, that has to be accounted for. I can't be doing jiu-jitsu against like 4 guys, right? Who do I have with me? Do I have friends with me? Am I by myself? Are there exits in the area? Like, if I needed to get the hell out of here, how am I going to go? Where are the exits? What can I use as a barrier if something were to happen? If someone was to come in, and I basically need to manage distance, which again is a concept that is parallel throughout all forms of martial arts. Doesn't matter if you're a guard player doing jiu-jitsu, if you're a striker trying to avoid strikes in a particular range, if you're in a self-defense situation and you are trying to make enough space so that your opponent can't attack you and maybe you can make an exit, like these concepts are throughout all forms of combat. And that's why it's really, really important to just sort of like take a look for a second and see what's going on. You get on the fight, or you get the fight on the floor, you should be looking around and seeing like, okay, am I going to be attacked right now? Like, do I have friends who have my back here? Is it smart for me to be on the floor right now? Sometimes someone come up and just bottle you or kick you in the head, right? These are the things that you need to be thinking about. Always keep aware of your surroundings. And again, like I'm victim of this. I'm not a victim. I'm guilty of this, I should say, where I'll be walking down the street with my headphones on. It's like, you have no ability to hear what's going on around you if you have two headphones on. So I started, now I only wear one headphone. I like to hear things around me. Even if I, walking around on my phone, if I don't take the SkyTrain anymore, but I used to transit every day when I had a normal job, I would always be on my phone and not paying attention to what's going on around me. And then I started looking around more. I started thinking, okay, like, what if someone's following me? What routes should I take when I'm going to a particular place? Should I be taking shortcuts through an alley? Should I be taking more of a route where I'm in plain sight? Should I be traveling during the daytime or at night if I can avoid it? Like, these are the types of things you gotta think about, because if you're constantly on your phone and you have earphones, then you are such a target, right? You are just more exposed. Again, if you want more tactics on survivability, check out my episode with Todd Fox that I did. And he, this guy, he has a global protection agency where he really protects some really high profile people, from bands to political dignitaries, lots of people. And he talks about how you can stay safe on overseas, or how you can handle situations. It was a very, very interesting episode. Okay, so now let's just go back to distance management. I briefly mentioned it in a striking context. If you need to understand certain ranges. If you're really far away from your partner, no one can strike anyone. But the second you get a little bit closer, now kicks open up, you get a little bit closer. Now punches open up, you get really close. Now things like uppercuts open up. So there's different strikes that can be landed at different ranges. We see this in military warfare, hand-to-hand combat, using bladed and blunt weapons. You go a little further, there's handguns and shotguns, and then a little further back, rifles. And of course, you can go all the way back to hunting, sniper rifles, missiles, things like this. Like, it's all about what weapon you're using at what range. And you need to understand that these ranges will affect the types of weapons you can use. In a grappling situation, if I'm on top of somebody, generally what I'm trying to do is take away this distance, right? They want to manage distance. They want to create space. I want to take away the distance. I want to get access to their core so that I can now start isolating limbs again. If I'm on the bottom position, it's all about managing the distance and keeping the fight on my terms, so that when I do decide to entangle a leg, or, if I get chest to chest on someone from the bottom, I have an underhook, or it's on my terms, right? Distance management, so important in all forms of striking and combat. All right, last thing. Let's identify the fastest path to victory, the most efficient path to victory, okay? I think anything else besides doing this is kind of just a waste of time and energy. You also have to, you kind of have to put ego kind of aside when you're going into things like competitions and stuff like that. So I have a competition coming up, and it's a 185-pound bracket competition. There's guys in there. I'm one of the smaller guys, to be totally honest, but I'm also I would say one of the more favored guys to win. It's called Battle Mats, and it's going to be put on by Battlefield Fight League, which is an MMA promotion. It's actually on July 12th, so it's coming up in just over 2 weeks here, and it's the first event is going to decide who the two finalists are. And then I believe in September, the two finalists are going to compete for, I guess, the Battle Mats 185-pound grappling title at the MMA show. Okay, so I'm going into this competition. I know who I'm fighting. I know who I'm most likely going to be fighting. I have to structure my game plan in such a way that I'm going to be using as minimal energy as possible. I'm trying to take the quickest, most efficient path to victory. And I have to put my ego aside and avoid certain things. For example, let's say I know somebody is an incredibly good wrestler. Okay. Why the fuck would I wrestle that person? I'm just going to exhaust myself. I'm going to put myself at a potential disadvantage. If I pull a guard, now their wrestling becomes somewhat neutralized, and I can play my game, and now they're forced to try and pass my guard. Just because you're a good wrestler, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a good guard passer, right? Or you're good at entangling legs. Another example would be like, okay, let's talk about ego for a sec. When Max Holloway recently fought Justin Gaethje, and then in that last 10 seconds of the match, Gaethje was losing the fight, and Holloway, gestured to the center of the octagon. You and me, let's stand here and just trade for the last 10 seconds. Like, Gaethje was losing that fight. He had no reason to do that, really, except to just get he was convinced he could knock out Max Holloway in the last 10 seconds. So he agrees. They go in the center. They just start trading, and Max Holloway gets like a last second highlight reel knockout that is just going to live on forever, right? That's not really the smartest choice, to be honest, if you're Justin Gaethje. Maybe you could argue, well, it was his only chance of winning the fight, and he wanted to win the fight at all costs. And, he has knockout power too. True. These things are all true. But what are the chances that that's going to happen in the last 10 seconds? when you're already losing the fight? Is that a smart choice? Because you get knocked out like that, and man, that affects your brain forever, right? That has consequences. Now you're on this highlight reel forever, getting knocked out. It's just, to me, great. There's a cat here. Get down. Potentially the cat just ruined the focus of the shot as well. It's just not the smartest way to fight someone. Like, you want to stand and bang with someone and let your ego do the tactical decision making. It's risky. Okay. When I go into a competition, if I know who's in there, I think, what are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? How can I exploit their weaknesses? How can I get to the next match with the most energy, the most efficient path possible? You hear John Danaher talking about in the intro of this show. What is the quickest, most efficient, whatever he says, path to victory? That is very, very valuable, right? That's smart for a competitor or for a soldier, for any kind of combat athlete, is to find the most efficient path possible. Don't waste time. Don't waste your energy. You need that when we progress to the next fight, right? Not every fight has to be you going for the submission relentlessly, and then you're trying to submit your partner so bad that you exhaust yourself, and now the next fight comes up and you have nothing left in the tank. It tactically doesn't make sense, right? Victory doesn't necessarily need to be flashy or beautiful. It can't always be that way. Okay, we're not all Gordon Ryan. We're not all Nicholas Marigali, where we're on such a level that we can submit someone every time. It's just not always possible. And so we have to have realistic expectations, and we have to just look sometimes for the best way to win. I hate to say it, sometimes it's by winning by an advantage. I know if those guys heard me say that right now, they'd be like, yeah, that's why you don't win anything. That's why no one's going to remember you. It's like, yeah, fair enough. But there, I'd say the majority of jiu-jitsu competitors out there, 99.9% of them, are just going in to win. Okay. They're not going in there, to win in the best way possible. They're just trying to get the win. They're just trying to win the medal, get to the next match, etc. Also understand that, like, rule sets will dictate tactics. Obviously, in a street fight, there's no rules. That's what makes, fighting on the street so stupid, is because you never know when someone's going to pull a knife out and stab you. You never know when someone's going to literally knock you out and then keep kicking your head until you die, or sucker punch you, and now you got knocked out and now you've cracked your head and you're a vegetable now. Okay. I know people that has happened to. In a jiu-jitsu situation, there's rules. In a judo situation, there's different rules. Jiu-jitsu and judo are essentially the same sport, but with different rule sets. And those different rule sets heavily dictate what the sport looks like, what the tactics and the strategy looks like, the moves that you can use, how you're going to play certain opponents. Okay. In judo, if you hit the floor, a lot of people will just shell up in the prone position, which is literally the worst position you can be in a fight. So it takes away all realism, right? And jiu-jitsu is guilty of this too. Obviously, jiu-jitsu, there's rules and strategies that are not realistic, but like, because the referee will come save you when there's not action, you've exposed yourself. Okay. In jiu-jitsu, you can just pull guard. Is that a smart thing to do in a street fight? No, not necessarily. I'm not saying it can't work. I'm just saying it's not a smart tactic necessarily. And so these rule sets will dictate what we can and can't do. Even like warfare, the saying, all is fair in love and war. True. And there's such a thing as war crimes. And of course, if you've heard of the Geneva Convention, where superpowers have agreed on these particular rule sets when they go into war. Okay, we're not going to, I don't know what they say, bomb hospitals or attack certain monuments and things like this. We're not going to kill prisoners of war. And throughout history, we've seen many, many armies go the opposite way and just do whatever they want because, hey, all is fair in love and war. You're bombing our country. We're going to drop bombs on your country. We're going to send in, guerrilla warfare and all this. If war is what you want, war is what you're going to get. So this is, we can pretend that there's rules to war, but quite often, if you follow the rules, you might be the only side following the rules. Everyone's going to try and win that war to the best that they can. And a lot of the time in those types of scenarios, there is no rules. In jiu-jitsu, we do have to follow certain rules. There's no slamming, there's no striking, biting, etc. No leg reaping. God, be the worst thing in the world if somebody reaps somebody's leg in the gi. Does it make sense? So we have to play within these rule sets, and those rule sets, for whatever situation we're in, we're going to dictate our tactics on those rule sets. In a street fight situation, you can knock someone out, but if they die, you could go to prison for a long time. So be careful what tactics you decide to use in those situations where there are no rules, because man, you could change your life forever. Also, when we're talking about efficient paths to victory, attacking small joints and weak spots. So, this is the idea of like isolating somebody's limb and attacking it, or breaking their leg so they can't stand up and fight you anymore, right? You heavily disrupt somebody's structural integrity by attacking one of their limbs, ideally one of their legs. Now it's very hard for them to chase you. It's very hard for them to tackle you, to kick you, strike you, to keep their balance. And now the fight has been made an unfair fight. This is why leg locks are so awesome. And the last thing we need to do when we're looking to win a fight, especially when we're looking at identifying the fastest path to victory, is manage risk versus reward. This is so valuable in life for everything, not just fighting. If you're going to make an investment, if you're going to buy property, if you're going to start a business, you have to be able to manage risk versus reward. If I put this much into it, what am I going to get back? If I'm in a jiu-jitsu match and I have guard and I shoot up a triangle, what are the odds that triangle is going to be successful? And what are the odds the triangle is going to fail? We discussed if I'm fighting a big dude, much bigger than me, what are the chances I'm going to be able to even lock a senkaku around their head and arm? Probably pretty low. So why would I put myself in that position? Tactically, it doesn't make sense. It makes sense more maybe to get underneath them, get behind them, be able to abandon a submission when I know it's not there and go back to just the safety of my guard. I always tell kids, not just in jiu-jitsu, but in life, always, when you're making decisions, assess the risk versus reward. And in jiu-jitsu, try to pick things that have low risk, high reward. This is almost always the right option to go for. Maybe a few scenarios where it makes sense to take risks. If the chips are down and you really need to do something quickly to win a match or whatever. But generally, when we're making decisions, just go back to what is safe and really keep yourself in a good position rather than going out of your way to get that arm bar or whatever, right? Like I always just tell them, when things are going bad, just go back to the safety of your guard. Just get your guard back. Don't worry about getting on top. You can expose yourself heisting up and showing your back and all this stuff. Just fall back and put your partner in your guard. And if they can't pass your guard, there's not much they can do to you, right? Risk versus reward. Very important that we need to assess this in any altercation, any competition. What are the risks? What are the rewards of whatever decisions we make? Okay, guys, that's all I got for you today. So if you want to support the show, please check out the show, the links in the bottom. You can check out my products and whatnot. Plus, I got some pretty cool stuff planned for this show. We're going to be expanding. We're expanding the show pretty quickly. I'll have more information on that in a couple of weeks. I got some work to do, and then I will let you know. There will be some awesome content coming out from me and the Everyday Jiu-Jitsu podcast in the future, and I'm really, really excited to share it with you guys. Other than that, thank you very much for listening. If you're still with me, guys, remember the Everyday Jiu-Jitsu podcast is everything you need to know about jiu-jitsu. I'm going to see you next week, okay? Thank you very much. Bye-bye.